Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast, the fifth episode. Today, I would like to talk to you about something that I think many engineers underestimate, especially at the beginning of their careers, and that is networking. When we hear the word networking, we might imagine people standing around at a business event with a glass in their hand, exchanging business cards and trying to sell themselves. And to be honest, that image can make networking seem rather unattractive, especially for engineers. Many of us are much more comfortable talking about technology projects, measurements, specifications, software, machines, or systems than walking into a room full of strangers and introducing ourselves. But I think networking is much broader than that. And over the course of a career, it can become surprisingly important. So today, I would like to look at networking from the perspective of an engineer working in Switzerland. Why should we network? What possibilities do we have? Should we pay for professional memberships and networking events? Or are there free possibilities? Is international networking useful? And at what point in our career should we actually start building a network? I would also like to look at the other side of the argument because networking costs time and not every networking event is useful. So let's start with a basic question. What actually is a professional network? For me, a network is not a collection of LinkedIn contacts, and it is certainly not about knowing as many people as possible. A professional network consists of people with whom we have some kind of professional relationship. That could be a former colleague, a university classmate, someone we worked with on a project 5 years ago, a customer maybe, a supplier, a professor, someone we met at a conference, or simply another engineer working in a complete different company. And the interesting thing is that we often don't know when one of these relationships will become valuable. Sometimes you don't speak to someone for 3 years, and then suddenly you have a technical question, or you are looking for somebody with experience in a particular technology, or perhaps you are thinking about changing jobs, and suddenly you remember, I know someone who works in that field. That, to me, is one of the real benefits of networking. It gives us access to knowledge that doesn't necessarily exist out inside our own company. And I think this is especially valuable for engineers. Engineering is becoming more and more specialized. You cannot know everything. Actually, the longer I work in engineering, the more obvious this becomes. There is always somebody who knows more about a particular subject than you do. And having a network means that sometimes you know who the person is. You don't necessarily need to know the answer. Sometimes it is enough to know whom you can ask. And there is another advantage. A professional network helps us understand the market around us. If you spend many years working for the same company, it is very easy to develop a kind of tunnel vision. You know your company, you know your product, you know your processes, you know your salary structure, you know how projects are managed. And after a while, you can start thinking that this is simply how the industry works. But perhaps it isn't. Perhaps it is just how your company works. Talking to engineers from other companies gives you a reference point. What technologies are they using? What problems are they facing? What skills are becoming important? Are companies hiring maybe? Which sectors are growing? Which technologies are disappearing? What qualifications are employers looking for? And even very simple conversations can give you a feeling for what is happening outside your own professional bubble. This becomes particularly important when you are looking for a new job. We often start networking when we need something, and I think that's actually too late. Imagine that you have worked for 10 years and hardly maintained any professional relationships outside your company. Then one day you lose your job. Suddenly you start contacting people. Hello, we haven't spoken for 8 years. By the way, do you know of any positions? That can feel uncomfortable. A much better approach is to maintain your network while you don't need anything. Occasionally talk to people, meet former colleagues, attend an event, congratulate someone when they change jobs, share an interesting technical discussion, and importantly, help other people when you can. Because networking should work in both directions. If the only time I contact somebody is when I need something, that's not really a professional relationship. It's a transaction. Good networking, in my opinion, is much more organic. Now, what possibilities do we have here in Switzerland? Actually, quite a few. There are professional engineering organizations and technical societies. There is ElectroSwiss, for example, particularly for people working in electrical engineering, energy, and related technical fields. There are international organizations such as the IEEE. There are also broader Swiss engineering associations and many smaller specialist associations. Universities and universities of applied sciences often have alumni organizations. And then there are conferences, exhibitions, technical presentations, seminars, and continuing education events. There are also less formal opportunities, meetups, industry events, startup events, technology presentations, open days, trade fairs, and of course, LinkedIn and other online professional communities. Some of these possibilities are free, others require a membership fee. And some conferences can be quite expensive. So is it worth paying a network? I would say sometimes. A paid membership can make sense when the organization is closely connected to your professional field and you actually use what it offers. Maybe you attend several events every year. Maybe you participate in technical committees. Maybe you use its publications or continuing education. Maybe it gives you access to people whom you would otherwise rarely meet. Then the membership fee can be a good investment. But simply paying a membership fee doesn't create a network. If I become a member of 5 professional organizations and never attend anything, I haven't really achieved very much. The membership card itself isn't the network. The relationships are. And there are also many networking opportunities that cost almost nothing. Meeting an old colleague for coffee, going for lunch with somebody from another department, keeping in contact with former university classmates, talking to people at a technical exhibition, participating in an alumni event, or simply having a meaningful conversation with someone on LinkedIn. One thing I would recommend, however, is choosing events based on their content rather than simply because they are called networking events. Personally, I think technical events can be especially good for engineers. If there is a presentation about power electronics, automation, artificial intelligence, energy systems, cybersecurity, embedded systems, or whatever your field happens to be, you already have something to talk about. You don't have to walk up to somebody and invent a conversation. You can simply say, "What did you think about the presentation?" And suddenly you're talking. The technology becomes the bridge between people. And for engineers, I think that can feel much more natural. Now let's talk about international networking. Does it make sense if you are working in Switzerland? I think it definitely can. Switzerland itself is already highly international. Many Swiss companies operate globally. Engineering teams can be distributed across several countries. Suppliers and customers may be located all over Europe, Asia, and North America. And technologies certainly don't stop at the Swiss border. So having professional contacts outside Switzerland can broaden your perspective enormously. You might learn that an industry is developing differently in Germany, China, the United States, India, Vietnam, or somewhere else. You may encounter technologies that are not yet widely used in Switzerland. And international contacts can become especially valuable if you work for multinational companies or if you are interested in working abroad at some point. But again, there has to be some purpose behind it. Having 5,000 international LinkedIn contacts whom you have never spoken to isn't necessarily more valuable than knowing 20 people whom you can actually call. Which brings me to another question. When should engineers start networking? At the beginning of their career, in the middle, or toward the end? My answer would be all three, but for different reasons. At the beginning of your career, networking is mostly about learning. You don't have 20 years of experience yet, so your network can help you understand what possibilities even exist. You can meet engineers working in different industries and discover career paths you didn't know about. You can learn what skills companies value, and perhaps somebody gives you one piece of advice that changes the direction of your career. In the middle of your career, the network becomes valuable in a different way. By then, you have experience yourself. You can contribute something. You may be looking for specialists. You may be hiring people. You may want to understand developments in another sector. You might be considering management, consulting, entrepreneurship, or a completely different technical direction. And your network becomes a way of exchanging knowledge rather than simply receiving it. Later in your career, networking changes again. You may have decades of experience. At that point, your network can become a way of passing knowledge to younger engineers. Mentoring becomes more important. And interestingly, younger engineer can also keep experienced engineers connected to new technologies and new ways of thinking. So networking doesn't really have an expiration date. But I would say the earlier you start, the better. Now there is another side to this. Networking can also become a waste of time. You could probably attend some kind of event every week, and if you try to maintain hundreds or thousands of professional relationships, you could spend an enormous amount of time doing it. At some point, the return becomes questionable. If I spend 3 hours traveling on an event, 2 hours at the event, and another hour getting home, I have invested a significant part of my day. Was it worth it? Sometimes. Absolutely. Sometimes, probably not. And I think we should be honest about that. Networking shouldn't become another obligation that we add to an already busy professional life. Quality is more important than quantity. One meaningful conversation can be worth more than 50 business cards. And networking also shouldn't replace competence. Having a fantastic network doesn't compensate for not developing your engineering skills. Ideally, the two support each other. Technical competence gives you something valuable to contribute, and your network exposes you to knowledge, opportunities, and perspectives that help you develop that competence further. There is also a type of networking that I personally find much more interesting than simply trying to meet important people, and that is connecting people. Perhaps somebody asks you a question and you don't know the answers, but you know somebody who does. So you introduce them. Or somebody is looking for a particular specialist and you say, I think I know someone you should talk to. You don't gain anything immediately, but over time, you become someone people trust. And I think that is one of the strongest forms of networking. Not asking, what can this person do for me? But asking, where can I contribute? Because professional networks are built over years and reputation travels through them. People remember who was helpful. They remember who shared knowledge. They remember who kept word. And they also remember the opposite. So perhaps networking is not really about networking at all. Perhaps it's about professional relationships. And I think that distinction matters. For engineers in Switzerland, I would therefore suggest starting small. You don't need to suddenly attend 10 conferences. Look at the people you already know: former colleagues, classmates, customers, or suppliers, people from other departments. Then perhaps choose one or two professional organizations or events that genuinely interest you. Attend because you want to learn something, and while you're there, talk to people. Not because you need a job, not because you want to sell something, simply because you're curious about what they do, and then maintain some of those relationships. You don't need to contact everybody every month. Sometimes a message after a year is completely fine. The important thing is that the relationship is genuine. And maybe that is the biggest lesson for me. A network is something you build before you need it. When you suddenly need a network, it is difficult to create one overnight. But if you build professional relationships naturally throughout your career, they become part of your professional life. They help you understand your industry. They expose you to different ideas. They help you find expertise. They can help when you're looking for a job. They can lead to collaborations and opportunities you could never have planned. And occasionally, they simply give you someone to call when you're sitting in front of a problem and thinking, I have absolutely no idea how to solve this. And knowing the right person to ask might be almost as valuable as knowing the answer yourself. So, is networking important for engineers? I think it is, but perhaps not for the reasons we normally associate with the word networking. It is about collecting contacts. It isn't about attending every event. And it isn't about constantly trying to promote yourself. It's about staying connected to the professional world beyond your own desk, your own project, and your own company. And in a profession that depends so heavily on knowledge, experience, and collaboration, that connection can be extremely valuable. So maybe the question isn't, do I need to network? Maybe the better question is, who are the people I want to keep learning from, and who might one day learn something from me? And with that thought, I leave you for today. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.